Vic Morrow really hated him more than anyone else. Vic Morrow was born on February 14, 1929, in the Bronx, New York City. Morrow grew up in a working-class Jewish family. Like many young guys back then, he grew up right after the Great Depression, which was a really tough time that taught him to be strong and determined. Before he became an actor, he went to Florida State University, where he first tried to study law. But he quickly realized that law and school stuff wasn't for him. What he really loved was telling stories, expressing himself, and performing. This change made him decide to become an actor, and he trained at the Actors Studio in New York, a famous place that helped shape some of the best actors of the 1900s. Morrow's big Hollywood moment came in the mid-1950s when he started showing up in movies and TV shows. His tough looks, intense eyes, and ability to show real emotion made him really stand out right away. He got early roles in movies like Blackboard Jungle in 1955, where he played a troubled teen in a groundbreaking movie about kids. Getting into trouble, this movie really helped launch his career because people quickly noticed how good he was at playing characters. With raw energy and deep feelings, through the late 1950s and 1960s, he slowly built up his reputation in Hollywood. Playing complicated roles that often showed characters who were conflicted inside, had authority, or were really tough. Probably his most famous TV role was playing Sergeant Chip Saunders in the popular World War II show Combat, which ran from 1962 to 1967. This show was one of the most realistic and intense war shows ever on TV back then, and it let Morrow show off not just his acting skills, but also his ability to play a leader on screen. His portrayal of Saunders was both strong and caring. He was a leader who could be tough when needed, but was also deeply human inside. For millions of TV watchers, Morrow became the perfect example of a war hero, brave, troubled, and really dedicated to his men. This role made him super famous and gave him a permanent place in TV history. Outside of Combat, Vic Morrow appeared in tons of different movies and guest spots on TV shows. He acted in westerns, crime shows, and even tried directing, showing how versatile he was in the entertainment world. Movies like Dirty Mary, Crazy Larry in 1974, and Humanoids from the Deep in 1980 showed he could switch from mainstream war shows to more cult classic movies that attracted a whole new group of fans. That his coworkers also really admired him for being professional and dedicated on set. He often went out of his way to help younger actors and work with directors in a thoughtful, respectful way. From 1957 to 1964, Vic Morrow was married to actress and screenwriter Barbara Turner, a woman who later had her own successful career in Hollywood, as both a writer and sometimes an actress. Their marriage brought together two creative people during a time when both were still making names for themselves in the entertainment business. While Morrow was becoming known for his strong performances in movies and TV, Turner was starting to explore screenwriting, and eventually people respected her for her smart, character-focused scripts, even though their marriage only lasted 7 years. They had 2 daughters who would each, in very different ways, carry the weight of their family's complicated history. Their first daughter, Carrie Ann Morrow, struggled her whole life, facing lots of personal problems that troubled her, until she sadly died in 2016. Carrie mostly stayed out of the spotlight, and was mainly known because of her famous family and her troubled life. On the other hand, their second daughter, Jennifer Jason Leigh, became a big star in Hollywood, becoming one of the most versatile and praised actresses of her time. Leigh chose a stage name, dropping her father's last name, Morrow, and using Leigh instead. This showed both a break from her father's shadow and the start of her own unique identity as an artist. In 1975, more than 10 years after his first marriage ended, Morrow got married again, this time to Gail Lester. Although this second marriage started well, it didn't work out. The couple ended up separating before Morrow's sudden death in July 1982, leaving behind a personal history full of instability and distance. His relationships, especially with his family, were really complicated, and the pain from these broken connections lasted long after he died. Maybe the most heartbreaking of these broken relationships was Morrow's distance from his daughter, Jennifer Jason Leigh. After he divorced Barbara Turner, father and daughter grew more and more distant, and their relationship never got better. Leigh's decision to change her last name was a symbolic move, a way to become independent from her father, while also protecting herself from the burden of being publicly connected to him. When Morrow died, tragically, father and daughter were still not speaking, something that haunted Leigh and affected how she talked about him years later. In a 2018 interview, Leigh spoke openly about her complicated feelings about her father. She admitted, "My father was very difficult. We were not close. It's hard. I don't really talk about my father publicly because there are lots of people who really love him very, very much. His work as an actor, I don't want to ruin their admiration for him." Her words painted a picture of a man who, while loved by fans for his screen presence, It had been much harder to love at home. Lee's decision not to say negative things about him publicly showed both her respect for his legacy as an actor and her awareness of the difference between his public image and private struggles. Despite the pain of being distant from him, Lee admitted that her father, along with her sister Carrie, were important influences in shaping her artistic journey. She once described her sister as a drug addict, someone whose troubled life forced Lee to face the darker parts of life at a young age. It was, she explained, her desire to better understand both her absent father and her troubled sister that partly inspired her to become an actress. By throwing herself into fictional characters, Lee found a way to explore human complexity, longing, and conflict, emotions that had been central to her own life experience. Her performances often showed raw honesty, maybe coming from the wounds of her family history. When it came to the people Vic Morrow worked with during his career, few could bring up the kind of raw emotion that Steven Spielberg did. Morrow had worked with many directors and producers over the years, and though he wasn't a stranger to arguments, Spielberg was in a category all by himself in Morrow's eyes. The two men, though both deeply connected to the film industry, came from totally opposite worlds. Spielberg was the wonder kid, the boy genius director who had become famous with Jaws and cemented himself as a legend with Close Encounters of the Third Kind and E.T. the extraterrestrial. Morrow, on the other hand, was a tough character actor whose bread and butter had been gritty TV roles, especially as Sergeant Chip Saunders in the popular World War II drama Combat, where Spielberg saw the future of movies through big blockbuster spectacles. Morrow carried the old-school way of thinking of a working actor, grinding it out through endless takes, tough scripts, and directors who demanded everything. Tomorrow, Spielberg represented everything wrong with Hollywood. He often dismissed him with harsh, unfiltered words. Spielberg's a kid who never grew up, Morrow once snapped, his voice carrying that gravelly frustration that marked his screen presence. He plays with actors the way a kid plays with toy soldiers. No respect for the craft, no respect for the people putting their lives on the line in front of the camera. These words weren't just casual comments. They showed a deep hatred that had grown as Morrow watched Spielberg's rapid rise to fame. In Morrow's view, Spielberg treated film sets like fancy playgrounds, bending human beings into props for his grand visions, with little understanding of the toll it took on the people doing the work. Their most famous fight happened during the making of Twilight Zone, the movie in 1983. Spielberg wasn't directing Morrow's part, that was handled by John Landis, but Spielberg was one of the producers overseeing the project, and his name carried weight over every decision. Morrow saw Spielberg as responsible for the chaos and recklessness that eventually led to tragedy. Don't let anyone tell you Spielberg wasn't aware. Morrow supposedly complained during breaks on set. When you're at the top, you don't get to wash your hands of it. If something smells bad, it's because the fish stinks from the head. His anger got stronger as he witnessed what he thought were dangerous shortcuts and a lack of concern for safety. Morrow, who had built his career on playing tough, principled men, wasn't afraid to speak his mind. Spielberg's about money and glory, he muttered to a coworker one night. He's not about people. He doesn't care who gets hurt, as long as his name's up there in lights. These were not the words of a man simply jealous of someone else's success. Morrow had his own steady career and was respected by his peers. Instead, it was the view of a man who felt that Hollywood had changed into something colder, shinier, and way less humane. Spielberg, to him, symbolized that change. Even outside of the Twilight Zone set, Morrow would bring up Spielberg with a mix of disgust and bitterness. At industry parties, he'd scoff at the way younger actors went crazy over Spielberg's latest hit. They think he's a god, he'd say with a shake of his head. But gods are supposed to protect people, not use them up like spare parts. His anger wasn't the quick kind that went away after a few drinks. It was a burning resentment.